भी डॉक्टर हरीश मल्होत्रा आज फिर तुहाडे लई अज एक स्पैशल प्रोग्राम लैके आया। अज सोच दा सफ़र जिहड़ा प्रोग्राम हैगा वो पोस्टपोन हो गया। वो जिहड़ा प्रोग्राम सीगा अगले हफ्ते आपां करांगे। मैनू क्योंकि चेंजिस तां करनियां पईयां क्योंकि मैनेजमेंट कमेटी ने लास्ट मिनट ते मैनू कहा कि टोरी कैंडीडेट जिहड़ा कि MP ਲਈ खड़ा हो रहा हैगा उहनूं इंटरव्यू करना। सो नॉट वेस्टिंग मच ऑफ द टाइम, Mike, I welcome you to Kanshi studio. Mike Newton is the candidate for the Conservative Party in Wolverhampton. So just welcome you and best wishes for the future. Can you, before we actually make a start, can you just give us some introduction of your background, Mike?
I'd be very happy to, and thank you very much for having me on the show, Harish. It's a great honour to be here on Kanshi TV.
Right.
So I'm not the usual politician type, actually. I never thought that I would be involved in politics at a high level. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I was asked by a friend of mine who is an MP to consider running for office that I thought about it seriously. So I'm definitely not a professional politician or a career politician in that sense. My professional background is quite interesting. I used to work for the Bank of England, then I worked in the international markets for many years, and now I own a series of small businesses, which is includes everything from hospitality through to consultancy. In terms of my personal background, I'm very happily married to my wife Laurie. We don't have any children, but we have a beautiful English bulldog called Assicus. And I was educated at a comprehensive school in Staffordshire, and I was a major in history with a minor in economics at King's College, Cambridge. So I feel very blessed to be with you here today, Harish, and thank you.
Okay, Mike, before I come to some of the issues, why people should vote you?
I think the way the election is shaping up is that it's very much a contest about the type of Britain that we want to see in the future. I think a lot of people will look back at the historical Tory record and think that they want to punish us. But what I would do is to urge people to be forward-looking. I think that Labour's tax plans are extremely unclear. I think that Labour would definitely like to raise inheritance tax, put in place a variety of other wealth taxes, including the revaluation of council tax bans. And my values, which is what I'm running my campaign on, my values are very much faith, family, hard work, personal responsibility and economic freedom. I believe that you should keep more of what you own, and I think the government should stay out of your wallet.
Okay, one of the biggest issue which particularly not only to the Asian people, I think to everyone, which is concerning is the situation of NHS, National Health Service. I have been living in this country for more than 50 years, and many of our viewers, they must be more than 50 or 60 years here in this country. We had a very good service, GP service or hospital appointment or anything, and now the situation is not the same. What the Tory government is going to do and what you in particular will actually do to rectify the whole situation?
Absolutely. And look, I think that we're extremely grateful for the contribution of the South Asian community to the development of the NHS. I was speaking to a doctor the other day in Wolverhampton, a very senior consultant who talked about the need for there to be proper reform in the NHS, and I think whoever gets into government will need to do that. Look, let's face it, Harish, right? The NHS that we've known and loved since 1945 doesn't really exist anymore. You know, as a nation, we can't afford it. The demographics of the country have changed. We're fatter, we're older, we're living longer, and I think anybody realises that there has to be some kind of structural change. But to do that, there must be consensus, and it must be something that brings the whole nation along, and healthcare must be affordable to everybody. If you look back at what we've done so far as a Conservative government, the two major structural things that we've done are to put in place the increased ability for pharmacists to prescribe, and I think that's something we could definitely do more of in the future. And we have also done quite a bit in terms of long-term planning through the new personnel plan to develop long-term personnel supply for the NHS. And I think, to be fair, the amount of immigration that we've had into the country has also meant that the NHS has been burdened like never before, and of course has backlogged from COVID too. And none of these are excuses, but they are facts. And I don't want to be political here, because I know this is a very sensitive issue, but also the junior doctor strike hasn't helped.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
And the latest one has cost something like 91,000 appointments, and I think we very much value the work the junior doctors do, but at the same time, a 35% pay increase when we've got inflation back down to 2%, I just don't think that's right.
Many people, they are nurses, for example, or the doctors. They're leaving Britain and going somewhere else, to Canada or to Australia or to New Zealand or to other European countries. That is a quite worry. I understand that the many Asian doctors, they have been retired now, and many nurses, they are out of profession, they are retired now. But what are the policies, what you will push for to recruit our local people? Is there any incentive or is there any plans what to do?
I think that what we have to do is to make the NHS as good a place to work as we possibly can. And I think that comes through two things. I think that comes from taking a perspective that we have to be very flexible about things such as shift patterns. You know, we want to make the NHS a great place to work. And I was talking to a nurse recently in Oxley, in the top end of Wolverhampton, who was talking about, you know, the 12-hour shift patterns and things like that. And in some ways, they're a positive, but for other workers, they're a negative. So I think we need to look at the conditions that we have for NHS workers and see if we can adjust those to ensure that we get the maximum benefit for patients, but also the maximum benefit for the staff, and hopefully they'll want to stay with our NHS. But I would also add that I think we have to be very mindful that the NHS is not run for the benefit of the doctors and nurses.
Absolutely.
It's run for the consumer. And I think while it's important to listen to what the practitioners are saying, it's also very important to listen to what the patients are saying. And the British public aren't stupid, Harish. They know that there needs to be a reform of the NHS, but at the same time, they're scared that it's not going to be free at the point of access. But speaking as a Conservative, I don't think there are any plans whatsoever, if we're lucky enough to have another term of government, to take away that free healthcare at point of access. That's something we're simply not going to do. These stories about privatisation of the NHS...
That was going to ask, because that's another concern.
Yeah.
Is it going to happen like the American model we're going towards? Or?
I think there's no chance of that. I think, you know, maybe in the medium to long term, if there was consensus, we could look at a hybrid model, but everyone would have to buy into it for that. But that remains very much a longer term thing to discuss. There's no chance of us moving to an American model, I guarantee it. Okay,
coming to the education, which is another very big point for all of us. That's our future anyway, our children's our future.
Yeah.
In Scotland, I think there's no fees for the graduates, people who want to go for undergraduate education. Is there any possibility that in the future we will have no fees for the children who want to study further in the universities?
I think the people who have higher education should pay for it. Now, the amount they should pay is obviously something that is up for debate. But at the same time, I think that, you know, those of us who have been lucky enough to go into higher education, or will be lucky enough to go into tertiary education, should make a contribution. You know, I think that's only fair. Where I am very worried about fairness in education right now is with this proposal to remove the VAT exemption for private schools. I think this is very wrong, and I think that it really crushes aspiration. The Labour Shadow Health Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has made it fairly clear that this is a social policy rather than a policy to make education better, i.e. it's class-based envy. And I just think it's wrong, because, good example, I was at Tetton Hall College the other day, speaking to spoke to a family of Nigerian heritage, and they basically put all their eggs in one basket. They haven't had a holiday for 3 years, really clamped down on consumption to put the kids through a private school to make it better for future generations. I don't see why you can't have that freedom of choice and good private schools running alongside really good schools in the state sector. My father was a teacher. He was head of sixth form at King Edward's in Stafford. My mother was a secretary at a school in a place called Blythe Bridge in Staffordshire.
Right.
We come from an education family. I myself have a charity that teaches outdoor resilience to young adults. I know the importance of strong state education, but I don't think it's right that aspirational working and aspirational middle class parents should have the opportunity to send the kids to the school of their choice ripped away from them like that.
Okay, but there are people who are very poor or poor enough not to send their children for the education. Is there any schemes for those people to go for the professional qualifications for the Tories?
Well, I think that the way the professional qualification system works in this country is that it's largely, it's largely self-funded or funded by employers, and I don't think we have the resources at the moment to move away from that. But we've just announced another 100,000 apprenticeship places.
Yeah.
And I am a strong believer in the skills that we need for the next generation being provided by a partnership between the private sector and the state. I mean, if you go back, you and I are both, able to remember the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely.
When the big factories like Tangye's, for instance, ran fantastic apprenticeship schemes. I know we're not going to bring those days back fully, but I do believe that the best apprenticeships are provided by firms. They know what they need. Some subsidy from the state is appropriate at certain times, but I don't think that we should take all training of young adults into the state sector. I think firms need to train people for the jobs that they need to do. Just the other point I'd like to make is that one thing that I've noticed in my interactions with young adults, and this is one of the reasons why I set up the Newton Family Foundation for Leadership, is that post-COVID, young adult resiliency has dropped off quite significantly.
Sure.
And I'm very focused on how we build that resiliency back up. I think it's a very important point, and I think we need to be very, very thoughtful about how we do that.
Even some of the schools, they're complaining that they're not getting enough funding. Is there any possibility from the Tory party now, if you become a ruling party again, to give more funding to the schools?
I'm a governor at St Teresa's Catholic Primary Academy in Blakenhall in Wolverhampton West, and we've emerged over the past couple of years from being in special measures to having a good rating from Ofsted now, and obviously any additional resources that the state can provide are very welcome. But to me, one thing that we simply have to accept is that as we move into quite a difficult environment for the public finances, I mean, we spent 400 billion on subsidies with COVID, on subsidies connected with the increase in energy prices. We've now, I think, got to take a decision as to how much we want to spend on defence. That's going to be a real issue going forward. What I'm saying is that I think we have provided a vast amount of money. Look at the increases in reading standards. Our reading standards are among the best in the world now, from being very middling historically. What we have to do is to make sure there's a partnership between the state, the people who teach in these schools, and the parents. Because I am a strong believer in family. I was taught to read at a very young age. I think a lot of kids are. I don't think that schools should become a substitute for family. I think they can work alongside the family, and of course there are going to be children who don't come from great families, and we have to support those kids as best we possibly can. But the reality is that the state can only do so much, and we need to support our great teachers, and we need to support the kids in the home to get the job done, as we've successfully done at St Teresa's in Blakenhall.
Connected to the school is the crime. Number of young people offending, and the knife crime is increasing or has increased, and number of lives have been lost because of that. And people are very concerned, irrespective of which communities, either it's the Asian community or it's the African Caribbean community or it's a white community or whatever community it is. And the schools can only do up to a certain extent. They can't actually do everything. And on the other hand, the police force, there's a lot of reduction in the police force. If you look around, number of police stations, they have been closed down. So what the Tories, or what you yourself is going to do about it?
Right, so what I'm going to do is just talk about the background to police numbers very quickly. When we went into government in 2010, then we were left as self-admitted by the Labour Party, with that note saying there's no money left, a fairly dire public situation when it came to the country's finances. So we had to make cuts, and the police were cut. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, it's likely that the police were perhaps cut a bit too much. Let's be honest about that. And since 2019, we've been doing a build back. And here in the West Midlands, we're pretty much level pegging with the number of officers that we had back in 2010. So we have built the force back. We're only about 200 short, and that will kick in the next year or so. So I think the idea that we don't have enough officers, I think that's largely been put to bed. I think what's most important is how we deploy those officers. Did you know, Harish, that in 2023, out of nearly 8,000 police officers in the West Midlands, warranted officers, 3,663 didn't make a single arrest? I find that astonishing. And yeah, the WMP is in special measures. I'm looking further up the road at what's happening in Manchester with the Greater Manchester Police, which has come out of special measures and turned around quite dramatically under the new Chief Constable, Stephen Watson, where things such as stop and search have been introduced. The police is investigating every crime, and you've seen a complete turnaround in Greater Manchester under the new Chief Constable. Here, we've got a Labour Police and Crime Commissioner. The West Midlands Police needs to make significant improvement. And I think that if I was elected to Parliament, I'd very much look forward to working with the police and other relevant bodies to try and boost police efficiency.
Because the offences, it's not only the crime of the knife crime I'm talking about the general crime. For example, there's if you look at number of cars have been stolen every day, and unemployment or homelessness, for example, number of crime elements are around. And even in our homes where I'm living in, which area, it's a comparatively quite good area. And we're hearing that number of people actually are stealing the cars or the breaking in the houses. And we're really concerned. And I'm a member of this, which is called Neighborhood Watch. Again, that's as a volunteer, I'm doing it. But that's the responsibility of the police actually to support us in that sense. But what I'm saying is that people actually are really frustrated now.
Yes.
Because the crime is going up and they do not know what to do. And that's a big concern to the people. And on top of that, if you're just coming back from the schools, for example, there are a number of children even suffering from mental health problems, not only in general public, but number of mental health issues, they have gone up since I had my education in this country. So are we going to do anything about those issues at all? That's what I'm just bringing the issue again. Are we pumping more money or pumping more people into that? Are we thinking to have counsellors, for example, attached to each counsellor or to each school or to few schools together? Or what are the plans?
Yeah, so I'll address these two separately.
Yeah.
The number one issue for me in the whole of Wolverhampton is knife crime.
And also in Birmingham as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think it's terrible. And not long after I was selected, there was a young guy called Harley Hepworth who was murdered in West Park. And that really affected me because when he's selected to run for a seat and something happens, it's a terrible crime. You are affected by it. And I felt very deeply for the boy and his family. And I've noticed when I've talked to people, good example the other day, I was talking to a lady down in Penn, Nigerian heritage, and she was talking about how she's worried to let her kids out, and Harish, that can't be good for them.
No, you know? If you don't feel secure anywhere at all,
can't be good for them. And talking to another lady in Merry Hill, different kind of background, but still very worried about when her kids come home from university and they go out. It's not good. So this fear of knife crime is very damaging, and the actual knife crime itself is extremely damaging. So, look, I think that we need to do more on stop and search, and it's changed a lot since you and I were growing up. Let's face it, right? It was an excuse for white officers to often arrest people of black and Asian heritage. Now, as the police has become more diverse, then my sense and my ambition is to see black and Asian officers arresting white criminals, right? That's the way we.
It's across the board. I understand that.
It's changed. So I'm not squeamish from a community relations perspective about stop and search. What I would say is that let's have stop and search used more effectively in Wolverhampton, like has been the case in Greater Manchester, and let's also think about mandatory minimums for knife possession. Now, if I am elected, then, as you know, MPs are able to argue directly to ministers
Sure.
about policy. And one thing I promised the constituents of Wolverhampton West I will do is to argue for a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence for knife possession with intent. So I think we need to do something strong to move the needle as a deterrent, in addition to preventative measures.
Connected to the knife crime is a drug.
Yes.
Smoking weed, for example, or all sort of stuff that's quite available on the street.
Yeah.
And some of the people not only drinking alcohol, but they are having the weed or whatever that stuff he's smoking through the vaping or any other way. The government is very concerned about that, or because we haven't seen any strategies or any plans? And what would you do to make the people more safe so that they can go out quite safely, and particularly the women? A number of cases have happened where they have been harassed, or even in some cases rape have happened. So how we make the city, Wolverhampton for example, make a safe city then?
Yeah, well, I'm very anti-drug, and I know opinions do differ about this, but I was brought up in a home where, as I said, Dad was a teacher, Mum worked for a secretary part of the time in a primary school, but before that she was probation officer.
Sure.
And she spent...
My background is, by the way, social work actually. I have taught social workers in the university as well, up to very high level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my mum was a volunteer visitor in Drake Hall Prison for many, many years as well. And so we were always brought up that drug use was a bad thing. And I think that's left me with a view that drugs are best avoided. Now, again, I think that it's not a view that everyone shares, and opinions differ about whether weed leads to harder drugs and harder drugs lead to even harder drugs.
Sure.
But I've seen evidence, my own eyes, of open air drug dealing in Wolverhampton. And again, I think a lot of this goes back to two things, right? It goes back to the family, where we need to discourage this kind of casual criminality. And it also goes back to the police. We need the cops to be out there doing intelligence-led policing, because look, I'm not going to mention names of neighbourhoods but we know where this drug dealing is taking place, and something has to be done about it.
Another thing which is quite dramatic, and also Wolverhampton or Birmingham, whatever the West Midland area is, you will see that because you're a part of that. Wolverhampton is not very far off from Birmingham. Homelessness. We have never seen so many people sleeping on the street and begging. That wasn't the case for Britain. And now that is quite rampant. What are we going to do about that?
I think some of it obviously is caused by drugs and alcohol, isn't it? We've all, I know this is outside Wolverhampton West constituency, but whenever I drive through Bilston, there's one chap I see every time. I won't say what the location is. I just feel terrible for the guy, because clearly, he's been ravaged by drugs and alcohol, and it's terrible. We have to find a way to stop this. But I think what we've got to do to deal with these issues is to be more effective in stopping drugs. And let's face it, we're never going to stop drugs fully, but if we can start to cut off the supply and put in place even better treatment programs for addicts, I think that will help. And the other thing that we need to do is to make sure that the sale of alcohol, particularly to minors, is properly controlled. And there are already laws in place for that, but we need to make sure that those laws are properly enforced. I know we can't do everything, but I think you are very much on the same page that the homeless are among the most vulnerable people in our society, and we cannot simply give up on them. In terms of the centre of Wolverhampton, then there are some buildings there that I think could be repurposed. Not necessarily as sort of homeless shelters where people are dumped into them, but where people could be repurposed with public-private money to be able to give people a pathway to a better life. I think that's an important idea.
Coming back to the home, why I'm saying coming back to the home is that gas bill is increasing, electric bill is going up. Now they're saying from 1st of July today they're going down a bit, but not as it should have been. And the council tax is going up. And some people, they are unemployed, they can't even afford the mortgage. and the houses are being repossessed. That could be one of the reasons that people have becomes homeless.
Yes, I think the cost of living is a factor. We've given a lot of support, as I said earlier, to people with utility bills. We're working very hard to keep utility bills as manageable as possible. As a former Bank of England official, then interest rates and inflation are something that I specialised in throughout my career. And I think that the Bank of England clearly made policy mistakes in terms of not tightening monetary policy too soon and allowing inflation to get a toehold. So if elected, I very much want to be involved in the policy debate around Bank of England reform. I know it sounds a bit like a geeky thing, but I'm sure some of our audience are drifting off to sleep as we speak, Harish, but nonetheless, I don't want to see in my lifetime a repeat of this cost of living crisis, because it's like the 70s all over again. And we want to give our people a better life and get past those days, don't we? So I think it's important. It's not been a great time, and I think as a Conservative, where mistakes have been made that can be attributed directly to the Conservative government, I apologise to people for that.
One of the biggest labels you can say is always put to the Tory party is that it's a party for the rich people, not for the working class people. What would you say on that?
Well, I think that the Conservative Party has changed a lot, and as you may know, I used to be in the Labour Party. My father was very much strong Labour. He was born in the northeast of England in Newcastle, and there's any people from the northeast listening in, that he was born in Benwell. So when I say he was born in Benwell, most people assume he was a drug dealer. He was real old school Labour, and I was a Labour activist right until my mid-20s. And I lived in the US. I did some work for President Obama, helping to register African American voters in Philadelphia, which is a very interesting experience. But look, I think the party's changed a lot. We've seen working class Tories really become very prominent in Parliament. You've seen people like Mr. Sunak, people with diverse ethnic backgrounds got to the top. And I know your point was about whether it's wealthy people who still run the Tory party. I think far from it. You only have to look round the Midlands. Look at Andy Street, who's a good friend of mine, straight up kind of guy, says what he thinks, thoughtful, inclusive. I think he's very much the face of the modern Tory party. And one of the reasons that I feel that I'm running is to continue the work that Andy Street did. People, not to digress too much from your question, but people I think need to remember that if they don't, we've seen a lot of buyer's remorse about Andy Street on the doorsteps. Many people wish that they'd voted for it, and that's not to be disrespectful, to Mr. Parker at all. But I think a lot of people think, my goodness, why didn't I get out and vote for Andy? So my message to people watching is make sure you get out and vote for Mike Newton. Don't leave it to someone else to do it, Okay, coming back to the environment now. Environment is on everyone's concern, and environment is quite high on the agenda for each and every country. And we are looking for that there should be electric cars, for example, and we should look for the ozone gas or even carbon dioxide, emission. So we're talking about that thing. But when we look at the environment, we'll talk about that in a second. When we look at the environment from the local issues, sort of, there's a lot of rubbish, for example, on the streets, and even I do litter picking every Saturday. A number of other people actually do litter picking with me as well. But the point I'm making is that still there's a lot of rubbish around, and with that, the rats are there, and so much infection is there. People become more sick, for example. Are we going to do something about that? Look, I agree with you. It's a major issue, and
now I understand that is the local councils, but you as an MP, when you become an MP, how much influence you can have on that? Well,
that's it, isn't it? And I'll answer your question directly, but I'll also make a broader point. It's very easy for me to sit here and say, well, it's a Labour council in Wolverhampton, it's a Labour council in Birmingham, and then the argument back from them would be, well, after 2010, there were spending cuts and we haven't been able to afford things. And then I would say, well, we have given you an enormous amount of money and we're pretty much back to where we were on the spending. And the MCA has been a huge driver of economic growth, and where would that get us, Harish? Nowhere, right? All we would be having is, between Labour and Conservative, these kind of circular arguments that I think have put people off politics. My commitment to the people of Wolverhampton is that if I'm elected, then I will work very closely with the Labour Council to get things fixed. And I will advocate for resources when they are needed, you know, and I will also advocate that the issues that you describe, with things like refuse collection and all the other little annoyances, potholes, let's work together.
It's coming to the potholes, because the cars are being broken down, you know, and insurance goes up, and that's a big concern.
That's it. But we've got to work together to solve these problems, rather than just ranting and raving at each other. Potholes, I'm very much an advocate of these machines that do the job in one go, you know, and I think we need one in Wolverhampton. And one of my election commitments has been to start the crowdfunding process for one of those. But we've got to work together to get things fixed and get away from this shouting and fighting between the political parties.
One thing which is really concerned is that I was listening to Radio 4 even when I was coming here, the security of the MPs, and two MPs have been killed anyway in this country. That used to happen. I'm not saying that used to happen, is that was very much case in India, for example, or other those countries where we majority of us has come, but not in this country. What is happening? Why people don't trust the MPs now? Because the trust is another thing which is connected to that they don't trust what they say. Why people should trust you, what you are saying today?
Well, I think just to go back to what you're saying about security, then I remember being back in Pakistan in the 90s, and I was at a cricket game in Rawalpindi. It was a one-day international between Pakistan and South Africa, and Benazir Bhutto arrived at the stadium. So
I mean, Indira Gandhi was killed, you know. You may agree with her politics or not, but that's the case.
So I think in this country, to your point, we've not been used to political murder of the type that we've seen, and obviously, you know, we are making sure as we go about our business as candidates that we make sure that we look after ourselves, and there are certain special branch guidelines that have been given to us. But I think also it's incumbent on us as candidates to keep the temperature respectful. I get on very well with Mr. Warinder Singh Juss. He's my opponent, not an enemy. You know, okay. And whatever the result is on Thursday,
that's fine.
It'll be like shaking hands, the captain of two teams. And, you know, whoever wins and whoever loses have to accept it. But to your point, why should people trust me? And I don't think they should, right? I think what they should do is to see what I can deliver. Because it's very easy for me to sit here and say to you, Harish, I've got a great resume, you know, I believe in these values, I believe in those values, right? It means nothing to people watching without some evidence of delivery, you know? So what I'm saying is, listen to what I say, judge for yourselves as to my character and demeanour, what I've done, professional career, a lot of engagement with Wolverhampton, a lot of things going on that are very inclusive and diverse of modern conservatism, and give me an opportunity. And if I can deliver, have me back, and if not, give me the sack.
Very good. Have me back, or otherwise give me a sack. That's a good. Yeah, I like
That's
it.
what my wife said.
About the foreign policy, number of people have got concern, apart from Palestine, which actually affected many people, particularly the Muslim community have affected. And also the Ukraine war. Number of people are saying that the Tories, they have put a lot of money, and I say that even the Labour hasn't got any additional or any alternative plan for that. What they're saying is that they're pumping a lot of money to the Ukraine war, and also they're putting a lot of money to, in whatever way it may be, to supporting this Israel and Palestine, against Palestine. Is there you have any views on that, or any, you can influence the policies of the government on that issue, because it has affected the citizen of British people. It has affected them, not only affected in that way, emotionally and sentimentally. It has the people are saying, why don't that money put into the country where is needed. Our country needs that money so that we can make the standard of living people's high a bit. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to spend as long as you want on this. So what I'll do, I'll pick a few things out of what you've said, and then you come back if I've missed anything out. So I'm a former Army Reserve officer, so I have some understanding of security and a military type environment. And I also have spent a lot of time in the Muslim world, whether travelling, whether for business. And I've been a guest of the Palestinian Authority back in late 1993 in Nablus, actually, not long after the Oslo Accords were signed. And I've also visited Israel. I have good friends there. And I think that when you look at the Muslim world as well, then it has suffered in many ways. It has suffered in places like Bosnia, which is now largely forgotten. It's been a minority religion in other countries and suffered there too. Maybe Burma, another example of that, right? And I think people are very mindful of the sensitivities about how our Muslim brothers feel. My position on the Israel-Palestine question is crystal clear. And it's in line with government policy as well, which I think is the only way forward. I think we should have a ceasefire with simultaneous release of hostages, and I think that we need to move towards a two-state solution. And let's be in no doubt, Harish, right? A two-state solution is something that is going to involve painful compromises for both sides. But it's not really for me, as someone who's running for office in Wolverhampton, to say what those compromises should be. But on the issue of Gaza, I am all ears, and I've taken a lot of feedback from the Muslim community already. We've had a respectful dialogue, and I'm open to further dialogue and input. And not just from the Muslim community, from all people, people of all faiths and of none.
Again, which is a big concern on the foreign policies, for example. I was listening to the news this morning, what actually is happening in France, for example, and what's going to happen in Netherlands or Belgium or Italy. Very concerned. The right-wing element is going up and up. And also our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had a slur, recently from UK Reform Party's volunteer, whatever they're calling it. So how are we going to tackle that?
It's interesting because I would frame the question slightly differently insofar as I do think there has been a rise in extremism, but I think it's also been on the left as well. I mean, we could talk about the situation in France from two perspectives. The French parties have come together with a fairly left-wing platform, and some parts of Labour's platform here are quite left-wing too. And then if we were to go even more to the extreme left, look at what's happened in places like Portland, Oregon, where the police have been defunded and the city's now unlivable, So, look, I think what we need to do to prevent the rise of extremism on both the right and the left is listen to people and act on their concerns, because people have a right to a voice, even if you don't agree with what they say, let's listen to it and let's find a way through dialogue to move people more towards the centre. So I think social media obviously hasn't helped.
It plays a big part, yes, I agree.
But we can't switch that tap off, it's here to stay. But I think, again, as politicians, it's up to us to make sure that the dialogue we have is, firm when it needs to be, but respectful and inclusive,
Even in the police, for example, if you look at the police, because it is to do with crime as well, in a sense, that the police force should be that you can trust police force, but there are a number of cases that have happened where the police was involved in the crime as well, and some of the police officers, they were even arrested, So what my concern is, as a resident of this country, is if I go for a job, then they check my background, if I've done any crime or not. It's called DAB something, isn't it?
DBS.
DBS, sorry. DBS investigation or whatever they want to check out. How come some of the police officers, they were not sussed out?
I know. I mean, it seems surprising, doesn't it? I'm a big believer that we must try and do as much as possible to make sure that, particularly in public service, bad apples don't get through. And, it's incumbent on colleagues to, make sure that the behaviour of their colleagues is appropriate. I very much stay out of chat rooms because I think people can end up saying terrible things in chat rooms and whatnot. You know, people have to show some self-discipline. That may sound old-fashioned, but it's true. But also, I don't think that people should even, call me an idealist if you like, but I don't think people should think these bad things about women or people of different faiths or ethnicities. I don't think people should even think this stuff. You know, this is 2024. We should have moved on in these ideas. How do we keep these people out? The screening to become a Conservative parliamentary candidate is very thorough. You know, it was a combination of DBS, references. I have one of mine from Mervyn King, who's former governor of the Bank of England. You know, they really go to town on you to make sure that you have proper referees, and you know, in things like the school governorship, which I talked about, St. Teresa's, Blake and Hall again.
I have been in school governor for a long time.
There you go. Yeah, we've been DBS to death almost, haven't we, between us?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we can't have a police state either. You know, so I think there's an element of common sense that has to creep in here.
One of the questions which comes up in some people, not many people, that we have got more than enough MPs in this country, while the country is not that big. We have more than 500 MPs, or 560 or 569, something. How many?
It's higher than that. Yeah,
more than that. Do we need so many MPs?
Well,
because what I'm saying is, you know, India is a very big country, and 140 crore, population we have got there. Do we need so many MPs in this country?
Well, I think the expectations of what an MP can do have changed in recent years, and you know, the casework that was done by my predecessor, Stuart Anderson, in Wolverhampton West, he's got two outstanding caseworkers in Councillor Sohail Khan and Councillor Paul Singh, and they have shifted something like 50,000 pieces of casework. You know, so I think there's an expectation that previously a matter that you might not necessarily contact your MP on now is a matter for the MP, and you know, that's right. We have to move with the times. But
no, what I'm saying is a need. But I hope that you become the MP. Isn't that a real issue? That do we need so many MPs?
Well, the point I'm making in a rather long-winded way, Harish, is that because people expect us to do a lot more than we ever did, you know, we're now expected to get involved in, and rightly so, in very micro local issues such as traffic lights and potholes and things. Previously, that would have been left purely to the council. And I think to that end, because of the workload on MPs, then the number's probably about right. And the population is going up significantly as well.
The country is still the same as far as area is concerned.
Yeah, but we have experienced significant population growth without a significant increase in the number of MPs in recent years.
Okay, coming to that again, if I apply for a job, which I have applied for a number of jobs anyway, I have been quite a senior in local authorities, worked for a number of local authorities, and also being a lecturer at the university as well. There is expectations, person specification, that these are the criteria which I have to fulfill before I get any job. To become a councillor and to become an MP, shouldn't be there any criteria that a person must have at least a degree or post-graduation or something?
I mean, I think it would be wrong to introduce any kind of qualification for MPs, because to my mind, then the public must have representing them who they want, you know. And you know, let's face it as well, if we were to have say academic qualifications, then there are many people out there, terrific people, you know, on both sides of the house, who didn't go to university, who maybe left school at 16, you know, and they've been very, very effective local representatives. Look at John Major; he didn't go to university.
Yeah, I know.
You know, so there are some very good people who haven't. And I think if we did introduce, you know, a series of formal criteria, then it perhaps would mean that that women, people of colour, people with disabilities, you know, it might restrict their access to becoming elected representatives. So I would be against that. Let the people decide. They're not usually wrong.
I mean, I'm just throwing a pointer actually, which is a concern to me particularly, because if I apply for a job, then I must have a degree or have such and such experience, such and such qualifications, such and such personal skills, you know, whatever. But for becoming MP or a councillor, I don't see there's any of that.
Well, effectively, we we're interviewed by 75,000 people or so, aren't we?
Okay.
You know, that's the thing. Yeah.
And then the second thing which comes to that is that there shouldn't be any age, that after that age you can't become like what we heard of Joe Biden, for example. You know, the guy is 80 plus, and there should be a limit that you are retired. You shouldn't actually work after that as an MP.
Yeah, well, I think when the US Constitution was drafted, Harish, the average life expectancy was probably late 60s, wasn't it? So they perhaps didn't expect people to get beyond 80 when the Constitution was written. And so there is an age qualification, but it's on the under. I think it's 30, if I'm right. You can't become president unless you're north of the age of 30.
No, but the other age, for example, you know, once you become 70 or once you become 65, that you can't become MP, for example, or a minister or whatever it is. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, look, I think again, my general view is that we don't value older people enough in our society. Mm-hmm. You know, we may provide for them quite well financially through things like the triple lock, which is going to be the quadruple lock soon. Mm-hmm. You know, we want to protect their ability to pass wealth on to the next generation through being reasonable on inheritance tax and abolishing it if possible. But what I am saying is that money is one thing, but how we behave towards the elders is another. Absolutely. Right? And I think they've got a lot of wisdom. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean,
I'm coming into that category as well. I'm 70 plus myself.
You don't look it. Yeah, but I mean, I do think though that you open up an interesting broader point about how we should treat older adults and our senior citizens, because I think they're a great treasure, and I don't think we spend enough time with them. You know, in the Asian community,
absolutely.
I think that there's a great example for other communities there of multi-generational living. You know, we were in a home in Blakenhall, Golthorne Park, very recently, where we saw a wonderful example of that, and it's something that other communities need to think about as much that we can learn from that. It's very interesting because I often feel that this is one of the reasons why I'm against assisted dying, is that I think that quite often old folks are looked at by younger folks for what they can get out of it rather than what can we learn from them. So I'm worried that if we had assisted dying, you'd have older folks, senior citizens, who wouldn't want to be a nuisance and, should I put myself forward for the needle? I don't think that's right, and I think there are a whole lot of counter words.
I think that's quite a controversial issue anyway.
It is a controversial issue.
Yeah, number of countries which actually do assist that.
Yeah.
There's only 3 minutes left now. One thing, as an interviewer someone is applying for a job and then I'm interviewing that person. If I ask you, Mike, then why and how people should actually vote you? Why I mean is that, what are your good points? People must attach to you that I want to, because I'm not concerned. People should vote for Labour, people should vote for Tory, or people should vote for any other policy. Because you're a local person, you're MP for the Wolverhampton. Why the local people should vote for you as a person, not as a Conservative candidate, but as a person? What are your skills which people actually should look for?
Relationships. I think that is the most important thing in getting things done. And a politician's number one job.
And the trust?
Well, that's absolutely important, yes. But I think that one thing that people want from politicians now is delivery. And unless you build relationships right across the different groups you have to deal with, including people who are your political opponents, you won't get things done. And I made a lot of those very good relationships in Wolverhampton and the broader West Midlands.
With all the communities?
Yes,
right.
Exactly, exactly. And trust, well, people will have to judge for themselves whether I'm trustworthy or not. But I think once you relinquish that trust, it never comes back. The people of Wolverhampton, you have my guarantee that I'll never do anything to disgrace you.
Let us talk to the people now. Okay, then, go ahead. So the trust and the relationship, what else?
I think the most important specific things are crime, as we talked about. I think in addition to that, let's get the city centre going again. The city centre, we were saying earlier, Harish, weren't we?
Absolutely.
It used to be so great.
Absolutely. I used to work in Wolverhampton.
We come from all over the Midlands, wouldn't we, to go shopping there. And now it needs something doing. It needs a shot in the arm. And my number one project, an anchor attraction, the National Football Museum Midlands branch. Let's get that going. Use my experience of high finance and professional football. let's drag everyone together in a room and let's come out with the National Football Museum on the other side. That will really get Wolverhampton going again, I think.
The last question which I want to ask, because only 1 minute left now, anyway, I will say whatever else you want to say.
I'll give you a quick answer.
Is the, not the quick answer, in a way that if someone asks you what are your weaknesses then, what won't you do?
I think weaknesses have to be looked at in the context of what they were and where they are now. And I think that over the years, through faith, through experience, through putting myself in situations where I've encountered people who are different from me in every possible way it is possible to be different, I become tolerant and broad-minded, you know, and I love people and I enjoy dealing with them. So I think I maybe turned what perhaps was when I was a bit fiery in my 20s into something which I hope is a strong positive now. But we all have our weaknesses, and sometimes they come out to haunt you when you least expect them, don't they?
Mike, nice talking to you.
My
thanks
pleasure.
for coming in.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's the end of our interview. So only 20 seconds left now. And I just want to say to all of you, go on voting on that day on 4th of July. Go for voting. Go for Mike if you think Mike is best candidate, or anybody else. But Mike you have just seen how much he has to say. And thank you very much for watching it. And next week I will bring my own program. Have a good day. Best wishes.
Thank you so much.